Yes, I've mentioned the policy, the programming at the regional level, but then what does it mean also when you go down to the program, to the local area, to the ground? So the next, I will talk about what we've been doing in the last few years, particularly in the cross-border area in Moyale, what cohesiveness means. So we have different approaches that we have been engaged. The first one was on the institutional level. So on the institutional level, what we did was, for those who know Moyale, Moyale it's a cross-border area between Ethiopia and Kenya, where the border is super artificial. I mean, people from across the area live together. You have a family from one area living in one, and then the other going to schools. Again, the same access to school, mobility, the whole mobile population. I think the definition of mobile population actually is, well, Moyale is like an example of that. So and then of course, Moyale has opportunities and challenges. I mean, it's one of the trading area, but it's also in terms of when it comes to peace, it's a fragile area. So there are currently different peace structures that have been working both in each country, but also across border. So what we're trying to do is bring all these different peace structures together so that any initiative that IGAD or any other partner that comes to Moyale will have a coordinated approach, given that all the peace structures are consolidated. Of course, the peace structures includes, you have the youth, the women, the pastoralists, but also the elders and the religious leaders, as well as the government authorities. The other aspect that we engage in Moyale is ensuring the community is engaged, particularly when we do any intervention. So I'm really happy to see that we have our member here from our steering committee from Moyale, Wezoro Kabale Guyo, who's from the Oromia region. So welcome, and I'm really happy to have you here with us, because one thing we learn when we work Moyale, the role of local authorities, and then including their voice, even from planning. Not when you develop your projects and then you're done when you want to do your final report, but then even understanding what are the needs, who are introducing yourself, like building that kind of relationship. It really helped us when we start engaging with the local communities. When I say local communities, it includes from Kenya, but also from Kenya, Moyale, but from Ethiopia, Moyale, the Oromia and Somali region, and then the different clan groups. For those who know Moyale, Moyale has several clan groups that is important to engage and acknowledge in any intervention that you do. So the steering committee, working with the steering committee has been instrumental in all the different engagements that we do, but also understanding what are the needs of the community, what's important, what are the solutions. We don't want to come from Djibouti or Nairobi and then propose a solution. And what we want is for them to tell us, this is the solution that we want. Because at the end of the day, this is their place, this is their home, they know their problem much better than us. So having the steering committee has been extremely, extremely important. I don't know how much I can emphasize that. So thank you for joining us in this meeting, and I hope we'll have you more in the future. The other engagement that we also looked at is having a cross-border office in the Moyale, so that it would also help us for regional, also developing local development plans, information exchange. What we know is that normally, especially among the different line ministries, information is not exchanged, except maybe education, security, maybe health. Other line ministries, even though the community is extremely interlinked, there is very few interaction. So with the establishment of the IGAD Cross-Border Facilitation Office with our friends from GIZ is to bring the two governments together to plan, share information, and then any intervention that we do is also inclusive. Because we know Moyale, I mean, it's one of the dynamic route for migrants. If I were to talk about who are the migrants, it includes the day laborers that goes from Ethiopia to Kenya in the morning, 6 a.m., return 6 p.m. back to Ethiopia. You have the students that come from Ethiopia side, to cross Kenya for schooling, but you also have the Ethiopian kids who work as herders on Kenya side. And then, of course, you have also those that migrate all the way to South Africa. So addressing any intervention that captures the needs of all this group is not an easy task. And what we try to do with our intervention and then also with bringing the office is try to hear from the different groups and not focus or come up with one approach that only address the needs of one actor. So as part of that, what we are also emphasizing is supporting the local authorities so to provide basic services. Particularly now we have identified two areas, education and health, given that those are the two needs that were identified by the communities themselves. So we will focus on supporting the local authorities so that they provide improved services for the communities of the one I attached, and then of course those that are not also included. Lucas, next slide, please. As part of, so far I've talked about our structural institutional support, but also one of the initiatives that we did that was just concluded on supporting communities' cohesion was through cash intervention and then support to livelihood. We started this idea during COVID, especially when the suspension, the restriction of movement, especially areas such as Moyale were drastically affected. Of course, Moyale, we know, yes, there's COVID yesterday, but now there is drought, and so we have different recurrent challenges, man-made and natural, that happen. So we started with a small pilot initiative, cross-border engagement, identifying who are the vulnerable group that could actually benefit from this cash intervention. The idea was, yes, we want to support temporarily, because cash is always a temporary solution. It's not something that you can give long term. So what we wanted to do was support communities that were drastically affected, especially their livelihood affected by the COVID, and then of course subsequently other disasters that in Moyale, and then but also out of that give them. Lead them to some kind of livelihood intervention, particularly focusing on vulnerable groups such as women and youth, and then people that are affected by disabilities. So the steering committee was important. It helped us to identify, but also select who should benefit from this cash intervention. But because when you give cash, it's also sensitive. So it can either generate another conflict, or it can either generate you to a solution. So they helped us in identifying who should be part of this process, but also in the design, selection, providing a strategic advice throughout the process. So we selected, of course, from both sides. From Ethiopia, you have the Ethiopia-Oromia region, and as well as the Somali regional administration were involved in this process. They were part of the steering committee. And then from the Kenya side, you have the Moyale, the county government that were involved, but also from Marsabit, I think we have the Marsabit administration was involved in this process. So we selected, I mean, you would see the image. This was one of because image that we captured. The cash was not just the cash, because like I said, cash could be a spoiler, it could be an opportunity giver. So we wanted to emphasize also the community cohesion, given that Moyale is a very volatile area. So we asked communities to identify what are the cohesive activities that they can actually do that would make sense for them. So they have identified, they actually initially, I remember, they gave us a long list of activities that they could be able to do, but one of the things that they ended up doing was cleaning the area, the neighborhood, the streets. So the image you would see is communities working and cleaning their streets. I mean, this might sound like very simplistic, but the fact that they were together doing it, and it's also their suggestion was very important, because cash cannot just be a solution, because we want to emphasize the cohesion aspect of this process. Next slide, Lucas, please. There were two key outcomes that came out from this. One was the woman empowerment. I think it's a nice jargon maybe for some, but it's when we see it in Moyale, it has been extremely important to see the role of women and how they were active not only in the steering committee but also in the different activities, including the livelihood intervention that are currently happening. So the woman empowerment was one of the key point that came out, but also the social cohesion. I think emphasizing the social cohesion and understanding that peace is essential. You cannot negotiate with peace, especially when you want to work in addressing long-term solutions within mobility. So the importance of social cohesion, working with the communities, bringing everyone a voice, whether it's the youth, the elders, the religious leaders, the market woman that sits on the street, has been extremely important, but also the different clan groups, because Moyale has several clan groups and sub-clan that you need to understand the dynamics if you want to engage. So those has been extremely important, and for me, what I would like to conclude is, yes, these are from some concrete examples that we show, but then how does this inform our policy programming? I think the whole idea of the scientific conferences, we don't want to leave this room at the end of Thursday with some recommendation that does not affect our programming, but also the policymakers that are here. So with that call, let's keep that in mind, and then I would like to stop here, and then thank you for your attention. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer, but I have quite a few colleagues here also that could come in the different thematic areas that I have highlighted. So on that note, thank you. Thank you, Fatima.
Thank you, Ms. Raj. I think that was a very good presentation and an eye-opener to set the scene. And I would like us to give Ms. Raj a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. With that, I think we have a slight change in our program. We would want to have before our lunch, since we've saved on some time, we want to bring one of our presentation earlier, and that is we would want to hear some keynote address from Dr. Bashair Ahmed, the Chief Executive Officer, Sabaka Organization, and it would be a virtual pre-recorded so that we hear on this. After that, we would go for our lunch. After lunch, we'd come back to this hall and have some guidance from Rachel and team on the breakaway sessions. On the same note, we would want Dr. Ayman to prepare himself, I hope, or herself, I hope I am. Then we would have a panelist, the panelist, Dr. Amina, Dr. Mohamed Abdullahi from COMESA, Sion, Tedese, are also required to prepare themselves. The rest of the team would have a breakaway session on room 1, and the panelists, and that looking at the program, we request that all the distinguished panelists, discussants, do go through the program and prepare accordingly. With that, I request our colleague to project the presentation. Thank you. Thank you. I am also informed that the full papers are also on the web app, and if you are able to follow from there. So can we have the presentation uploaded?
As a means for social inclusion. Unfortunately, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to be invited to give this address on access to basic services as a means for social inclusion. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you today, but certainly I'm with you in spirit. What do we hope to achieve through social inclusion? let's get back to the beginning. So access to basic services entails a right to housing, education, energy, and health, among other benefits of public interest, which are essential to satisfy human needs, not just to survive, but also to thrive. And I think this is an important thing to consider. And also, basic services ensure social justice and contribute to the equal treatments of all individuals. Such is the importance of access to basic services that it constitutes a key aspect to promote economic, social, and territorial cohesion as a consequence of sustainable development. It is based on principles of universal access to goods and services as well, and a fundamental right. Therefore, states are obliged to regulate and assure the provision of quality services for everyone within these borders. But also the responsibility also falls on other stakeholders, and this is a critical area of work. An example of this is our diaspora migrant communities. Through our work at Shabeka, and also lived experiences as individuals from migrant and diaspora backgrounds, we're aware of how these communities contribute to socioeconomic development in countries of origin, also in transit and in settlement countries as well. We've seen through our work, and we've documented it, that diaspora migrants do respond to humanitarian crises as well, mobilizing resources, skills, and engaged in transnational actions. However, at the current time, having diaspora and migrants as key stakeholders in the area of access to services and to promote social cohesion is yet to be realized fully. In many ways, they are seen as just beneficiaries of programs and projects, or cash machines to fund the various programs in place. And I think we need to kind of recognize that particular role of these particular stakeholders. That's why it's so important to work in close partnerships with all stakeholders is more important than ever. The COVID-19 pandemic was more than just a health crisis. It has triggered the most severe economic recession in nearly a century. It's pushing millions worldwide into extreme poverty and having devastating consequences across the globe. So access to basic service has become even more challenging. And the difficult reality is those who migrate to, from, and within IGAD, for example, has increased. And we're seeing this across the IGAD region with millions of people displaced. Many remain excluded from access to basic services such as healthcare, water, education, housing, transportation, protection. And even if not with the challenges within the region, we're also being consumed by challenges that are affecting everyone around the globe, such as climate change. So how do we address these? And I think this is why this conference, the focus on inclusion and social cohesion, is very timely. And this is a critical area, access to basic services as a means for social cohesion, not just for communities to just survive day to day, but also let's look at social cohesion more broadly as to allow for communities to thrive. We have a growing young population. So how do you address that? Looking at just the demographics, not just globally, but specifically in this particular region, with climate change and economic crises, are intensifying these, challenges of migration. We're having more people on the move than ever before in human history. And we're already feeling the effects of climate change, from record floodings in Sudan to the worst drought in the Horn of Africa for decades. People are affected, and many more are going to be affected. So we need to start thinking outside the box. How do we address these enormous challenges? How do we engage all stakeholders, including diasporas and migrant communities themselves? So let us not kind of look at this as an ecosystem, not as individual, results and impacts on that. We can look at other examples from, positive examples from other regions. So, for example, many countries in the IGAD region have a proud history of welcoming migrants and refugees. But we still need to also look at root causes. So we need to look at in front of us in the immediate term, but we have to look at the medium and longer term. And also we need to look at the question of entitlement and access for migrants and displaced population to basic services. So with all these challenges that are coming up, I think this is why this kind of conference is so important. And this is why I would have loved to also be there. I've seen some really interesting abstracts coming from that. And I think this is why I want to kind of move on to straightly into what are the key takeaways that we should consider going forward with this particular conference. Then we not just base it on just academic institutions in the North. We need these kind of conferences here we have in Nairobi are critical to deepen our knowledge, understanding of these dynamics of migration and displacement in the region, also informing policy and practice, and really look at what are the evidence based on that. And this is one important way forward. A second point is business as usual cannot continue. Piecemeal policies and actions are not sufficient to support access to basic services. We need to operate as an ecosystem well and truly, and this working with more diverse partners such as diaspora communities, the private sector and such. Donors and governments need to invest more in pilot projects that they may not be feel comfortable with. Think and do outside the box, because with the current needs nowadays, business neutral is just not good enough anymore. A third point is, I know it seems we are quite gloomy at the moment, but let us have hope and be a bit braver. For example, while the pandemic has heightened and reinforced existing structural inequalities in healthcare and other basic services, however, many governments, citizens, diaspora migrant communities have defied some of these gloomiest predictions in their responses. For example, remittances by diaspora was predicted to drop quite significantly during the COVID pandemic. However, it's actually increased assistance and financial direct investments. So with that, I'll just say I really look forward to hearing more about some of these discussions that you come away with. And thank you so much.
Hard for ourselves. The localization we like come out very well from this keynote address. IGAD has been pushing and the need to use social services, that is education, water infrastructure, as a tool for diplomacy. And this is what our secretary always talk about. These are very, very less controversial, areas of work, and this is what can be used to enhance diplomacy and social cohesion. And what my colleague Yemes Rach has talked about is in the Moyale border, mothers moving to seek services from the Kenya side or the vice versa, but also children coming to school on the side. Education services are better, and it is controversy in that area. I like this, and IGAD has been pushing for this, that we need to, I'm an expert on social services and specifically on health. I think this is the basics, and this is where we need to start from, using these services as a tool for social cohesion, and it works out very well. Then starting from the big things, let's start small and move towards the big issues that we want to address. With that, I want to invite Rachel to advise us on how to move forward with the breakaway sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fatuma. Again, I appreciate how well you've led us through that particular session. Now we go to where I think we'll be able to now engage more, discuss more, share ideas, share our thoughts, and also be able to contribute into the conference impact in regards to also giving ideas in terms of how does IGAD program with its partners on issues of migration and displacement. So this I will provide some guidance in regards to the breakout sessions. We are coming from different institutions. We have come from different expert areas. We have come from also different countries. So we would want to have an interesting discussion amongst ourselves. We'd also want to make sure that it's clear in terms of how do we proceed forward. So as you'll notice with the presentation of the papers, this will be parallel. So we have 3 breakout rooms upstairs on the first floor that can accommodate up to 40 participants seated. And also we'll have panelists sitting places that they can have. And also we'll have projectors that the presenters will be able to project. Given the technology we have right now, globally, we can also make presentations virtually. But in terms of contributions, we'll only be able to have contributions from the floor and not within from the virtual. But for the presenter who is virtual, they'll be able to chat and converse with the rest of the participants. So for the first main hall, we have, today we'll be having the presentation on access to basic social services as a means for social inclusion. And as you've seen, you've heard from the keynote speaker, there are very pertinent issues that we need to discuss in regards to the region. And the first paper we have by Dr. Amen Jabo. Unfortunately, as of today, he was not able to attend. He will make his presentation virtually, which is going to be held here at the main hall. We do have the discussant, moderator, who is Dr. Amina Sekale, a member of our steering committee for the conference. Unfortunately, she's not able to travel, or she was not able to days ago to an illness. Request the discussant, Mr. Mohamed Abdullahi from COMESA, if you could take lead in terms of moderator. But we'll give you the full support. If Mr. Abdullahi is here, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Are you okay with the moderation? I know I've ambushed you there a little bit. Yeah, okay. We'll also have one, which will be upstairs. The presenter will be Getnet Tesfao. Maybe he can, he's here with us. Internally displaced children due to armed conflict in Southern Wollo, implementation for intervention. The moderator is Dr. Catherine Langat, who's from our maybe Catherine, you raise your hand so that we identify each other, and followed by the and inclusion. If she's here, your hand. Thank you very much. If he's here, please raise your hand. Okay, he's not yet here, but we will continue, and we'll have a. Sorry, for the main hall, we have a representative from Djibouti to kindly nominate one of your delegates to please identify who will be sitting in the discussants, and then from Uganda to also do the same. I think Uganda, you're right at the end. We'll try and bring everybody closer as of tomorrow so that we also are able to not have such far distance sitting. Followed by that, we have the breakout room 2, also upstairs. We have Patrick Mutinda. He's in the house. Patrick Mutinda will be presenting his paper on a glimpse of social and economic integration of refugees and host communities in Kalobei settlement in northwest Kenya, based on the 2019 Kenya population and housing census. For the moderator, we have Mr. Charles Ogola, our statistician from IGAD, if he can raise his hand up. Thank you. And then we have our discussant, who is Marangu Jogu, Dr. Marangu Jogu, if you're in the house, thank you very much, we appreciate. And then we have a representative from Ethiopia. So we'll wait for you to nominate the participants. The other panel, the other breakout room is breakout room 3. In this breakout room, we have the GIS and the remote sensing techniques. This is a paper on assessment of groundwater available potential for migrants and displaced people using GIS. and Remote Sensing Techniques, a case study of West Nile, Uganda. This is by Peter Waswa. If he's in the house, please raise your hand. Thank you, he's right at the end. Peter Waswa, the moderators will be Dr. Mohamed El Duma, who is in our Dr. Deep program. We call it Dr. Deep. And then we also have Simon Derito, a colleague who is our GIS specialist. We also have Dr. Bedru, part of the family from the GIZ team, who's also a specialist in GIS and remote sensing. Then we'll have a representative from Kenya. Kenya nominees, you will select somebody who will sit in. And finally, after that, we will regroup. So the presenters will have 15 minutes to make their presentation, so as we can allow the floor to ask questions, give ideas, provide feedback in regards to the paper that they have presented. The papers are all available, all 14, in the web and mobile app. If you've not yet been able to access, we have a huge team right at the back. They are our techies that will help you also upload the app. Kindly note, this app is only specifically for use for this particular conference. After the 3 days, all the information will be completely deleted, but those that will be used for the purpose of the researchers and also for the purpose of the information that will be shared, then that will be retrieved from the mobile app as well as the web. And then after that, we'll have a plenary of 1 hour each, 1 hour, which is to focus now in terms of regrouping and discussing on the different issues that were being presented in the different 4 groups, or rather breakout rooms. We had Dr. Amina, unfortunately since she's not here, we'll request Mohammed to sit in terms of the panelists in the rapporteuring part of it. And then we'll have also Charles Ogola, we'll have Margaret Wanjiro, Juhi, Dr. Bedru, and also a representative from the member country, in this case Uganda. It's interactive, so please, there are other experts that can also bring in a lot of input. Please feel free to let us know, even using the app Q&A section that we have, which will enable us to capture more information. With that, we also have OSREA. This is an institution that also does a lot of publications on issues to do with social development, health, and so on. And they will be in each room and capturing feedback and the discussions that will be going on, and produce a report that is interesting, because we are going to be looking at messaging by media in regards to issues to do on research and how it informs policy, specifically on the subject matter on migration and displacement. I'm sure at least this has given you an idea of how even 2 days will go about. And what we would request, maybe we make sure that we are representing different rooms a bit equally. It might be hard, but the 3 rooms upstairs are close to each other.